Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I'm your teacher, Professor Nasir Iqbal, and today we formally start Aristotle and his famous treatise, Poetics or Art of Poetry. Yesterday, I regarded the background to Poetics because this Poetics was written in rebuttal to Plato's famous book, The Republic, in which Plato criticized poets and poetry and regarded poetry and all the branches of fine arts as mere shadow of shadow and copy of copy and imitation of reality or mimesis of reality as he calls it, and hence he wanted to banish the poets and all the artists from his ideal state or ideal republic. Aristotle, however, has his own views, and right from chapter 1 of his treatise Poetics, he took the same term of mimesis or imitation from Plato's Republic. Mind you that this imitation is not a term coined by Aristotle himself. He borrowed it from Plato, but the greatness of Aristotle is that he gives imitation used by Plato a new meaning, a new life, a new vitality, in fact, a new significance and new understanding, and rebutted the charges leveled by Plato on poetry and arts on the same concept of imitation, though he has his own interpretation of the term imitation. Today, we discuss what Aristotle means by imitation and how he differentiates different types of poetry on the basis of his concept of imitation. As you all know, and as I told in my last lecture, that Aristotle says, Plato says that painter paints the bed, and the bed was originally made by God out of some necessity or some need, and then from there the carpenter made that bed. God made the bed out of some necessity or need, and he made only one bed. And then so many beds were made by the carpenter by imitating the same bed made by the Lord Creator, God. And then the painter comes to paint the same bed made by the carpenter. So he believes that God's bed, the bed made by God, was real and original, whereas the bed made by the carpenter was an imitation of originality. It means the carpenter was once removed from reality, because Plato believes that the real bed was made by God. So carpenter's bed was once removed from reality. It was the imitation of reality. And the painter's painting of that bed is twice removed from reality because he imitated from the bed made by the carpenter. Hence, Plato believed that art or painting is twice removed from reality, and likewise poetry and music and all the branches of arts are not reality. They are the imitation of a thing already existing. Now, Aristotle comes to discuss and explains that there is a difference between painting and poetry. Poetry doesn't imitate something concrete. Painting imitates something concrete like bed. So this example of Plato was rejected by Aristotle, and he further gives examples that idea is real, not the bed is real. Idea that exists in the mind of God was real, and he transformed that idea into making a bed, and then this same bed was made by the carpenter, and from the carpenter the painter not only imitated the bed from the visible appearance, but he used his imaginative approach to imitate from the idea existed in the mind. So, Aristotle tells that imitation is not the copy of copy as believed by Plato. It is not the shadow of a shadow. It is not a crude imitation. It is rather an artistic imitation, because he imitated the things, artist imitated the things from the original idea, which is real. He does not, even the painter, even the painter does not imitate the things or imitate the word as it appears. Rather, he imitates the word or the things as they should appear. So, his imitation, artistic imitation, be it a poetic imitation, or it is the imitation of painting, or it is the imitation relating to any branch of art, is not a mere crude or photographic copy of something existing. Aristotle is of the view that this world, as we see it with our own eyes, is not the real world. It is changed by men. The men corrupted it. The men do not let this world remain as it was created by the Lord Creator, by God. And we have seen that this world or the things that we see are not in their real shape. They are changed from good to bad, or from better to worse. So the poetic imitation, with the help of imaginative approach, reaches to the idea that was quite real. So we say that this is how Aristotle proves by improving the concept of imitation as propounded by Plato and gave it a new significance, a new meaning, in fact, a new vitality. That is why concept of imitation is the most is perhaps the second highly debated subject in poetics, the first of course being catharsis, and later on when we will come to catharsis I will explain how catharsis is a highly debated subject. In the same chapter 1 of poetics, Aristotle uses a word mode, and he says that let's distinguish different types of poetry on the basis of mode. Different types of poetry like tragedy, epic, dithyrambic, comedy, etc. Dithyrambic is a type of poetry, perhaps you have not heard its name. Just I give you a glimpse of it because today I'm not concerned with dithyrambic poetry. Dithyrambic poetry was a theatrical poetry and it was sung to the god of wine, and tragedy is derived from dithyrambic poetry. So, on the basis of mode, Aristotle says that different types of arts and different types of poetry are distinguished on the basis of the object or on the basis of the medium of imitation and the object of imitation and the manner of imitation. These three terms are very important in Aristotelian concept of imitation. First we come to the medium of imitation, and on the medium of imitation Aristotle distinguishes between poetry and painting, and he regards poetry as a superior form of art because painting may copy the things as they look like, but poetry describes or talks of the human emotions, human behavior, and human attitude, and that's why poetry is superior to painting. And the medium of poetry is rhythm. The words used in a rhythmic order is the medium of poetry, whereas the medium of painting is brush and color. So poetry and painting can be differentiated on the medium of poetry, on the medium of these two different branches of arts. That the medium in poetry is rhythm, the rhythmic words, and on this ground, I tell you, in addition, that you can differentiate poetry from prose. That in prose, you use simply words without creating a rhythm, whereas in poetry, every poet needs to maintain the rhythm of the words. Poetry is always written in metrical form, whereas prose is written in unmetrical form. So, in poetry, as well as in dance, as well as in music, music too includes the rhythm. Dance is the rhythmic movement of feet, and music is the rhythmic movement of musical instruments. And if there is no rhythm in musical instruments, say the drum, if you beat the drum in an unrhythmical fashion, it will be called a noise. And noise is repulsive and offensive to human ears, whereas music is attractive to human ears. Aristotle cites the examples of flute and lyre, that if they are in the hand of a musical artist, and if he creates a rhythm through playing the flute and lyre, it appears quite attractive to human ears. Likewise, in dance, if you don't move the feet rhythmically, it appears ugly. People don't like it. So it is all about the rhythm. And through rhythm, I tell you that human body is all about rhythm. Our heartbeat is all about rhythm. If the rhythm gets disturbed of human heart, your ECG gets disturbed and you feel a sort of heart attack condition. So even God maintains the rhythm, right? So without the rhythm, the entire universe is nothing. The day and the night and the movement of the sun, they are and the movement of the earth, they are all rhythmic. Without this rhythm, the whole universe comes to a standstill. That's why, on the basis of medium of imitation, we distinguish poetry and painting, because they are different from each other on the basis of their medium. Right? The medium in poetry is rhythmic words and phrases, whereas in painting, the medium is color and brush. Next, he says that different types of poetry can be distinguished from each other on the basis of the object of imitation. The object of imitation in poetry is to present men in action, men in action, and a poet can present men in action in three ways. Either the poet shows men who are higher than normal in action, or he can show the men in action who are lower than normal, or he shows men in action who are just normal and common like we people. So, where the poet uses or shows men higher in action, this is called a tragedy, because in tragedy, a man has to come across, or the protagonist or the hero as you call it, comes across with so many hardships, so many difficult circumstances of life. That is why he should be higher than the normal, because he must have to perform some strenuous activities, some strenuous and difficult and hard tasks. He must be emotionally very strong. He must be emotionally stronger than the normal human beings. He must be psychologically higher than the normal human beings. So in tragedy, the poet shows men who are higher than the normal human beings, higher than we, the common people, in action. So tragedy can be a sort of a poetry which shows human beings higher than the norm. Then we come to human beings who are lower than the norms. So here we come across another type of poetry which is called comedy, because comedy is all about ludicrous activities in which the characters behave so ludicrously that that the audience smiles and laugh at their follies committed by the people who are lower than the common human beings. They need to be lower than the common human beings, because otherwise they cannot perform some low activities which produce laughter and which produce smile on the lips of the audience. So it is the need of the poet who intends to write comedy to use human beings who are lower than the common run of society. And then we come to poetry or to art or to drama or to even to novels which include human beings like normals, like ourselves. We are common individuals. We are normal human beings. We are not like the protagonist of the tragedies, nor are we like the characters shown in comedy. We are normal individuals who do not possess as much psychological strength, as much nervous strength, as much emotional strength to forbear the difficult and hard circumstances as borne by the protagonists of the tragedies. So the novels written these days, or the novels written in all the ages, are in fact based upon the inclusion of common individuals like ourselves. So, on the basis of the object of imitation, three types of different poetry or three types of art are distinguished: tragedy, comedy, and um, naturalistic plays or novels, or those writings which represent human beings like ourselves. And the third mode mentioned by Aristotle is the manner of imitation, in which we distinguish between tragedy and epic. Manners may be dramatic, and manners may be narrative, and manner may be descriptive as well. So, tragedy employs only dialogues, and the writer never intervenes in between the dialogues taking place between the two characters or more than two characters. That is why tragedy employs the dramatic manner. There, there is no descriptive manner, there is no narrative manner in tragedy. So, on the basis of the manner of imitation, we place tragedy on one side, and then we come to the epic, which implies both dramatic manner as well as narrative manner. When you go through an epic poem, say like Paradise Lost, that may be in your course, you will come across different dialogues, speeches of Saturn to his followers, speech of Beelzebub to Saturn, the dialogues taking place in book 9 of Paradise Lost between Adam and Eve. And the epic is in dramatic form, whereas epic is also in narrative form. Sometimes the epic writer narrates the events by intervening and not leaving the two characters, like the tradition, to discuss each and everything through dialogue. Sometimes the epic writer narrates the events. So, narration is also a part of epic poetry. Dramatic style is there, means dialogues are there in epic, and narrative style is also there in epic, whereas, as I said, narrative or narration is totally absent from tragedy. Tragedy implies only dramatic style. That is why tragedy is called superior to epic. And now, coming to the third descriptive part, means epic also includes description. Epic also employs descriptive manner as well. Description means to tell you about the scene, to tell you about the physical appearance of some character, to tell you about the condition of the room. If a writer tries to tell the audience what sort of environment it is where the characters are talking to each other, this piece of writing is called descriptive writing. This piece of writing is called description. So, description is also there because Milton describes hell, Milton describes the Garden of Eden, Milton describes the beauty of Eve, Milton describes the size of Saturn, huge size of Saturn in his similes. So, epic and tragedy can be differentiated on the basis of the manner of imitation. And Aristotle leaves the topic here, but let me tell you that since we are the students of novel as well, in novel, these three types of manner are also included, though novel is quite a later product, later than tragedy and epic. Tragedy and epic are particularly very old. They are from the Greek age. They got their origin, say, 2500 years back, even before the time of Aristotle, because Sophocles was the favorite dramatist, was the favorite tragedian of Aristotle, and he quotes Oedipus Rex time and again, and Oedipus Rex is his favorite protagonist. When we will come to discuss plot and tragedy and the different other topics like catharsis, we will have to refer to Oedipus Rex time and again. So, but the novel was produced in 17th, or you may call it grew up in 18th century. Novel also includes dramatic style, narrative style, and descriptive style. Narration means when a writer narrates some events. When the events are summed up by the writer himself, by the novelist, or by the epic writer, it is called, say, narrative style. Whereas in epic as well as in novel, sometimes the scenes and the physical appearance of the characters and the appearance of the room, or the drawing room or the bedroom, and all these things are described by the novelist and by the epic writers. That is why this sort of detail is called description. So, this is how, my dear students, Aristotle defends poetry on the basis of the same term as propounded by Plato, which is called mimesis or imitation, that poetry, tragedy, and various branches of poetry and various branches of art are not a crude imitation, or not the unreal or false imitation of reality. Rather, they are based on imagination, and poetic and artistic imitation brings us closer to reality, closer to the original idea that was in the mind of the Lord Creator. I thank you very much.